I'm currently pouring my mother a cup of Earl Grey tea in my custom-built kitchen. She looks frail, staring blankly at the imported marble countertops. It's a peaceful, picture-perfect domestic scene, until you remember that exactly 10 years ago, she threw my belongings into trash bags on my 18th birthday and told me I would be useless for the rest of my life. If you want to know what betrayal tastes like, it tastes like cheap grocery store sheet cake and dust. My 18th birthday fell on a rainy Tuesday in October. I didn't expect a massive party or a brand new car wrapped in a giant red bow. I grew up in a cramped, two-bedroom apartment in lower middle-class suburbia with a mother who looked at me like I was a bill she forgot to pay. Her name was Brenda. To the outside world, Brenda was a hard-working single mother who sacrificed everything for her kids. To me, she was a ticking time bomb of resentment. I came home from my shift at Mel's Diner, smelling like stale fry grease and cheap coffee. I was exhausted, nursing a burn on my forearm from the grill, but I had bought myself a little slice of vanilla cake from the bakery down the street. I walked through the front door, expecting the usual silence, or maybe the blare of the television. Instead, I found 3 black, hefty trash bags sitting perfectly aligned in the narrow hallway. My mother was standing by the kitchen counter, arms crossed over her chest. Her boyfriend of 2 years, a sleazy contractor named Greg Mitchell, who always smelled like cheap beer and sawdust, was slouched on our worn-out sofa. He didn't even look up from his phone. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to the bags. My heart started a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. "It's your stuff, Zoe," Brenda said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm, not angry, just entirely detached. "You're 18 today. My legal obligation to house, feed, and clothe you is officially over." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But Brenda didn't joke. "Mum, what are you talking about? It's my birthday. I just got off a 10-hour shift. And you can go right back to it, for all I care," she snapped, the ice in her voice finally cracking to reveal the contempt underneath. "Look at you. You're working a dead-end diner job. Your grades barely got you a high school diploma. You have no ambition, no drive, and no future. I'm not spending another dime of my hard-earned money supporting a useless adult who is just going to leech off me." "I pay for my own groceries," I yelled, the shock morphing into panic. "I pay for my own phone bill. I'm trying to save up for community college." "Community college," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Your brother Derek is at Penn State. He got a partial scholarship. He's going to be a corporate lawyer. He is an investment. You, Zoe, are a liability. Greg and I need the space. He's moving in full-time, and we're converting your room into a home office." I looked at Greg, who finally glanced up, gave a pathetic half-shrug, and went back to scrolling. "You're throwing me out on the street for your boyfriend's office?" The tears I was desperately trying to hold back spilled over. "Mum, please. I have nowhere to go. I only have $400 in my savings account. Just give me a month. 1 month to find a roommate." Brenda walked over to the front door and opened it, letting the cold October rain blow into the apartment. "I gave you 18 years. Grab your bags, Zoe. Leave your keys on the counter." I begged. I am not too proud to admit that I sobbed, pleaded, and promised to pay her rent. But Brenda's face was made of stone. She had made up her mind. I was a failure in her eyes, a blemish on her perfect narrative of being the mother of a future lawyer. She wanted me gone, out of sight, out of mind. 10 minutes later, the door slammed and locked behind me. I stood in the pouring rain, dragging 3 heavy trash bags across the asphalt to my beat-up 2004 Honda Civic. I shoved my entire life into the trunk and the back seat. That night, I parked in the back of a 24-hour Walmart parking lot. I locked the doors, curled up under a cheap fleece blanket in the passenger seat, and cried until I dry heaved. I felt so small, so entirely worthless. My own mother looked at me and saw garbage. For the next 3 weeks, that Honda Civic was my home. I quickly learned the humiliating logistics of homelessness. I showered at the local YMCA, sneaking in with a day pass. I kept my waitress uniform crisp by hanging it in the back windows and ironing it in the diner's break room before anyone else arrived. I brushed my teeth in public restrooms, making sure to avoid making eye contact with the women washing their hands next to me. The hardest part wasn't the cold or the stiff neck from sleeping on a reclining seat. It was the crushing, suffocating loneliness. The voice in my head that sounded exactly like Brenda, whispering that she was right, that I was useless. The turning point came when my childhood friend, Sarah Jenkins, caught me washing my hair in the sink at a gas station. She dragged me to a tiny studio apartment. Sarah didn't have much, but she gave me an air mattress in the corner of her living room and refused to take a dime of my money for 2 months. "You're going to survive this, Zoe," Sarah told me one night as we ate cheap ramen on her floor. "But you can't just survive. You have to win. Make her regret it." That night, something inside me calcified. The sad, rejected 18-year-old girl died on that air mattress. In her place, a cold, hyper-focused survivor was born. I didn't just want to prove Brenda wrong. I wanted to build a life so untouchable, so incredibly successful, that her rejection would look like the biggest mistake she ever made. They say success is the best revenge, but nobody tells you how exhausting revenge is. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. I kept my job at Mel's Diner, but I picked up a second job working the reception desk at a mid-sized real estate brokerage run by a gruff but brilliant man named Thomas Henderson. Mr. Henderson was old school. He didn't care about degrees, he cared about hustle, and I had a terrifying amount of hustle. While the other agents gossiped by the water cooler, I read their contracts. I studied market trends on my lunch breaks. I learned the zoning laws of our city better than the city planners. When an agent was too hungover to show a house, I volunteered. When Mr. Henderson needed someone to cold call expired listings on a Sunday morning, I was already dialing. By the time I was 21, I had my real estate license. By 23, I was the top-selling junior agent in the firm. But selling other people's houses wasn't enough. I wanted to own the ground I stood on. I wanted assets. I took every penny I had saved and bought a dilapidated foreclosure duplex on the wrong side of town. I spent my nights ripping out moldy drywall and laying laminate flooring with my own blistered hands. I rented it out, refinanced, and bought another. Then a fourplex. By the time I was 26, I had left Mr. Henderson's firm with his blessing to start my own property management and real estate investment company. I built an empire out of sheer spite and relentless grit. By 28, I owned a multi-million-dollar portfolio. I bought myself a stunning 4-bedroom modern colonial house in Oak Ridge, the wealthiest suburb in the county. I drove a brand new Range Rover. I had custom furniture, a walk-in closet full of tailored suits, and a bank account that made me feel safe. Truly, finally safe. During those 10 years, I heard whispers of Brenda through my Aunt Patty, who couldn't resist a good gossip session. The golden child, Derek, didn't turn out to be the family savior. Turns out, Penn State wasn't a good fit for a kid who preferred frat parties to study halls. He dropped out in his junior year. Instead of becoming a corporate lawyer, Derek became a professional parasite. He moved back in with Brenda, claiming he was finding himself while racking up credit card debt in her name. And Greg Mitchell, the sleazy boyfriend who got my bedroom? He convinced Brenda to take out a second mortgage on her apartment to fund a can't-miss commercial contracting business. A year later, Greg emptied the business accounts, packed his truck, and vanished to Florida with a 22-year-old bartender. Brenda was left holding the bag, a mountain of debt, a foreclosed apartment, and a 30-year-old son who refused to get a job. Karma was slowly circling her, but I never expected it to land right on my welcome mat. It happened on a Thursday evening in late November. I was sitting in my living room, drinking a glass of expensive red wine, going over quarterly reports on my iPad. The fireplace was crackling. Life was perfect. Then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. My heart stopped. Standing on my sprawling, illuminated front porch was an older woman hunched against the biting wind. She looked small, withered, and thoroughly defeated. At her feet were two scuffed, cheap canvas suitcases. It was Brenda. I walked to the front door, my bare feet silent against the heated hardwood floors. I unlocked it and pulled it open. We stared at each other for a long moment. The last time we had stood face to face, I was a terrified, weeping teenager, begging for a roof over my head, and she was a towering figure of authority, holding a trash bag. Now, the roles were violently reversed. I stood tall, dressed in a silk loungewear set, framed by the warm, luxurious glow of my foyer. She stood shivering in the cold, wearing a frayed winter coat, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Zoe," she whispered, her voice cracking. You have a beautiful home." "What do you want, Brenda?" I didn't call her Mum. I hadn't called her that in 10 years. She flinched at her first name. I didn't know where else to go. "Aunt Patty gave me your address. I lost the apartment, Zoe. The bank took it yesterday." "Derek." She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "Derek took the last of my savings out of my checking account 3 days ago and blocked my number. I don't know where he is. I have nothing." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I waited for the pity to hit me. But I felt nothing. Only a cold, clinical observation of the woman who had shattered my heart a decade ago. "That sounds like a terrible situation," I said evenly. "But it doesn't explain why you are on my porch." "Zoe, please," she sobbed, abandoning all her pride. "I have no money. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I can't go to a shelter. Please, I'm your mother. Just for a few nights. Just until I can figure something out." The words echoed in my head. Just give me a month. 1 month to find a roommate. I remembered the rain. I remembered the Honda Civic. I remembered the smell of the trash bags. A dark, twisted part of me wanted to slam the heavy oak door in her face and go back to my wine. It would have been justified. It would have been fair. But as I looked at her, trembling on my porch, a different idea formed in my mind. Slamming the door would be a momentary victory. Letting her in, letting her live every single day, surrounded by the wealth and success of the daughter she called useless, while her golden boy had left her to rot. That was poetic justice. I wanted her to see what I had become. I wanted her to live in the shadow of her own colossal mistake. "You can come in," I said, stepping aside. She gasped in relief, grabbing her cheap suitcases. "Oh, thank you, Zoe. Thank you so much. I knew you had a good heart. I knew—" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice slicing through her gratitude like a scalpel. "You aren't here because I have a good heart. You are here because I am allowing it. You can stay in the guest room at the end of the hall." She stepped into the foyer, dripping water onto my pristine rugs, looking around at the vaulted ceilings and the modern art on the walls like a peasant who had just wandered into a palace. "There are rules, Brenda," I said, locking the door behind her. The sound echoed with a heavy finality. "This is not your home. You are a guest. You will clean up after yourself. You will not ask me for money. And you will not, under any circumstances, ever speak to me with the disrespect you showed me 10 years ago. If you violate a single rule, you will find your belongings in black trash bags on the curb. Do we understand each other?" She looked at me, realizing in that exact moment that the power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had entirely inverted. She was completely at my mercy. "Yes," she whispered, looking down at her cheap shoes. "I understand." "Good," I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Welcome to my home." The first month of Brenda living in my guest room was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I didn't force her to be my servant, but I didn't stop her when she started acting like one. She would wake up at 6 in the morning, scrubbing the already spotless marble floors, doing my laundry, and attempting to cook meals I never asked for. It was a pathetic display of penance. She was terrified that if she stopped being useful, I would throw her out, exactly like she had done to me. I let her live with that fear. I let it fester. The real tension, however, peaked during the second week of December. I was hosting a private dinner party for my top investors to celebrate the acquisition of a massive commercial complex downtown. These were powerful, wealthy people. Thomas Henderson, my old mentor, was there, along with Richard Sterling, a ruthless venture capitalist, and of course, Sarah, my childhood friend, who had saved me from my car all those years ago. I explicitly told Brenda to stay in her room. I ordered her a meal from a high-end Italian place and told her the caterers would handle everything downstairs. But Brenda, incapable of letting go of her delusions of grandeur, couldn't help herself. Halfway through the main course, she descended the grand staircase, wearing a dated, overly formal dress she must have salvaged from one of her cheap suitcases. She walked into the dining room with a forced, aristocratic smile, carrying a bottle of cheap grocery store wine. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I just wanted to bring out a special vintage to celebrate my daughter's magnificent achievement. I'm Brenda, Zoe's mother. I'm sure she's told you all about me." The dining room went dead silent. The clinking of silver against porcelain stopped. Sarah, sitting to my right, gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Thomas raised an eyebrow, looking from Brenda to me. I didn't yell. I didn't lose my temper. I slowly placed my linen napkin on the table, stood up, and looked at her. "I'm sorry, everyone, for the intrusion," I said, my voice smooth and dangerously calm. "This is Brenda. She is a house guest currently staying in my spare room because she recently lost her home to foreclosure after her son stole her life savings. She doesn't have anywhere else to go." Brenda's face drained of all color. The fake, aristocratic smile peeled away, leaving behind raw, naked humiliation. She stood frozen, holding the $10 bottle of wine, her hands trembling. "Zoe," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Brenda, I asked you to remain upstairs," I continued, stripping her of the title of mother in front of the most important people in my life. "We are discussing private business matters. Please return to your room. The caterers will clean up your plate." Richard Sterling, the venture capitalist, cleared his throat and took a slow sip of his water, refusing to even look at her. Thomas looked down at his steak. The rejection from the room was absolute. Brenda spun around and practically ran back up the stairs, leaving the cheap bottle of wine on the edge of the mahogany table. Sarah leaned over to me and whispered, "Brutal." But she earned every second of it. I thought that night would be the end of her overstepping, but a desperate person is a dangerous person. A week later, the real twist happened. I have a state-of-the-art security system installed in my home. Cameras cover the exterior, the entryways and the hallways. I don't check them often, but one evening, while working late in my home office, I received a motion alert on my phone from the side gate at 2 a.m. I pulled up the live feed. The night vision camera showed a figure in a heavy hoodie standing in the shadows of my manicured hedges. A moment later, the side door from the kitchen opened. It was Brenda. She was looking around nervously, holding a small duffel bag. She handed it to the figure in the shadows. The man pulled back his hood, checking the contents of the bag. It was Derek, my golden boy older brother. The corporate lawyer turned professional parasite. I immediately pulled up the internal audio feeds from the kitchen, which recorded automatically when the alarm was disarmed. I hit playback on the past 5 minutes. "You said she has cash in the house," Derek's voice hissed through the speaker, laced with panic and aggression. "Mum, you promised. Silas is going to break my legs if I don't have $5,000 by tomorrow." "I'm trying, Derek. I'm trying," Brenda sobbed quietly. "She keeps the safe locked. I couldn't get the combination. But I packed up some of her silver flatware, the ones from the dining room, and 2 of the watches she leaves on her dresser. You can pawn them. It should be enough." "Watches? Are you kidding me?" Derek snarled. "I need cash. She's a millionaire, Mum. Just steal her checkbook. You're living in the house. How hard is it?" "If she catches me, she'll throw me out," Brenda cried. "She hates me, Derek. She humiliates me every day. Please, just take this and go. I'll try to find the safe combination tomorrow." I sat back in my leather chair, a cold, hard laugh escaping my lips. Even after everything, after he bankrupted her, after he abandoned her, after I took her in, Brenda was still sacrificing herself, and now stealing from me, to save her useless son. She hadn't changed at all. She was just playing the victim until she could find a way to exploit me. I didn't call the police. That would have been too easy. I wanted this handled my way. The next morning, it was raining, a cold, miserable December downpour that perfectly mirrored that Tuesday 10 years ago. I walked downstairs to the kitchen at 7 a.m. Brenda was already there, aggressively scrubbing the stove, looking exhausted and jumpy. "Good morning, Brenda," I said, pouring myself a cup of Earl Grey tea. "Good morning, Zoe," she replied quickly, not meeting my eyes. "I'm making some scrambled eggs if you'd like some." "I don't want eggs. I want to know how much pawn shops pay for custom Cartier watches these days." Brenda froze. The sponge dropped from her hand, hitting the stainless steel sink with a wet slap. She turned to me, her eyes wide with absolute terror. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. I pulled my iPad from the counter, brought up the security footage, and turned the screen toward her. I pressed play. Derek's voice filled the kitchen, clear as day, demanding my checkbook. Brenda's voice followed, admitting she stole my property. She collapsed against the counter, covering her face with her hands, sobbing hysterically. "Zoe, please, you have to understand. Silas is a bad man. He was going to hurt your brother. I was just trying to protect him." "Protect him?" I shouted, my voice finally rising, echoing off the high ceilings. "He stole your life savings. He left you homeless. And your brilliant solution was to invite him to my home in the middle of the night so you could steal from the daughter who put a roof over your head." Before she could answer, the front doorbell rang. I walked to the intercom panel on the wall and pulled up the front gate camera. It was Derek. He was standing in the pouring rain, soaking wet, frantically pressing the buzzer. "Let him in," Brenda begged, grabbing my arm. "Zoe, please just let him in. We can talk about this. We can fix this." I ripped my arm away from her. "Oh, we are going to fix this." I pressed the button to open the front gate. A minute later, heavy footsteps pounded on the front porch. I opened the oak door. Derek stood there, looking like a drowned rat. He didn't look like a golden child anymore. He looked desperate, bloated, and pathetic. "Zoe," he breathed, trying to push past me into the warm foyer. "Look, I need to talk to Mom." "Step back," I commanded, blocking the doorway. My private security guard, David, a former Marine I employed for my commercial properties, who occasionally worked details at my home, stepped out from the hallway, crossing his massive arms. Derek took a quick, frightened step back onto the wet porch. "What is this?" Derek demanded, trying to put on a tough facade. "I'm here to see my mother." "Your mother is busy packing," I said coldly. Brenda ran into the foyer, tears streaming down her face. "Derek! My God, look at you. You're freezing." She tried to step outside, but I put my arm across the doorway, blocking her. "Here is how this is going to work," I said, looking between the two of them. I reached into the pocket of my silk robe and pulled out a manila envelope, tossing it onto the porch at Derek's wet feet. "Pick it up." Derek hesitated, looked at David, and then bent down to pick it up. He opened it, pulling out a stack of legal documents. "What is this?" he asked, squinting at the pages. 3 days ago, the bank auctioned off Brenda's foreclosed apartment building, I explained, leaning against the doorframe. "I bought it. Through a shell LLC. I bought the building, and I bought the remaining debt that you, Derek, racked up in her name. I own it all." Brenda gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Which means," I continued, a vindictive smile spreading across my face, "that I am legally your creditor, Derek. I know exactly how much you stole, and unless you want me to hand these files over to the district attorney and press full fraud and grand larceny charges against you, you are going to disappear. You will never contact me, and you will never set foot in this state again." Derek went pale. You wouldn't send your own brother to prison." "Watch me," I whispered. "I have no brother." I turned to Brenda. "And you? You have a choice. You can stay in my house. You can eat my food, sleep in my guest room, and live a comfortable, safe life. But if you stay, you are dead to him. You will never speak to Derek again. You will cut him off completely, just like you cut me off. Or you can walk out that door right now with nothing but the clothes on your back and go be with your golden boy." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the heavy rain hitting the roof. Brenda looked at me. She looked at the luxurious, warm house behind me. Then she looked out at Derek, who was shivering in the cold, holding the evidence of his own crimes. For a second, I thought she might finally choose herself. I thought she might finally realize the reality of the monster she had created. "Mum, let's go," Derek said, his voice shaking. "We don't need her. We'll figure it out." Brenda let out a tragic, broken sob. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and sorrow. "He's my son, Zoe. He needs me." I nodded slowly. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt. I just felt a profound, overwhelming sense of closure. "David," I said, turning to my security guard. "Fetch Brenda's 2 suitcases from the guest room. Put them in black trash bags first. It's raining, and we wouldn't want her things getting ruined." 10 minutes later, I stood in my doorway, holding my cup of Earl Grey tea, watching Brenda drag 2 black, hefty trash bags across the wet pavement toward the front gate, following Derek out into the storm. Karma doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes it comes dressed in luxury, holding the deed to your mistakes, and locks the door behind you. If Zoe's journey from a heartbroken teenager sleeping in her car to a powerful real estate CEO proves anything, it's that the best revenge is your own success. What would you have done in her shoes? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of hard karma, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life dramas.